Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the Second Chance Act Smart Supervision Grant Program Orientation webinar. The purpose of this webinar is to share information about the grant program, resources that are available to support your work, and to answer questions about expectations for the grant period. Before getting started, I would like to briefly talk through a couple of housekeeping items about how the webinar is going to work. Anytime during the webinar, you can ask a question by typing it into the Q&A panel on the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. This includes both technical and content-related questions. We will try to reply to technical questions in the chat window as we go. For the content-related questions, we will keep a running list and address them all at the end of the webinar. We will do our best to get through as many questions as possible. If you do encounter technical or audio problems during this webinar, you can also call WebEx Technical Support at 1-866-229-3239. That's 1-866-229-3239. Please understand that there are some technical issues you may not be able to resolve. For this reason, we are recording the content portion of this webinar, and we will post it on our website at csgjusticecenter.org/NRRC. We should have the webinar posted online in the coming weeks. Once it has been posted, we will email you a link to the recording. Today's webinar is organized into 4 parts. First, we will start with introductions, then provide an overview of the Smart Supervision Grant Program. Third, we will discuss the support available to you during your grant period. We will conclude with a question and answer period, and as I mentioned earlier, please type your questions into the Q&A panel. My name is Tiago Mez. I'm a Senior Policy Analyst here at the Council of State Government Justice Center, and I will be serving as your interim TA provider for this grant and the primary contact here at the CSG Justice Center. I will be presenting today along with Heather Tubman-Carbone, Senior Policy Advisor at the Bureau of Justice Assistance. We are also joined by Rachel Novak from Multnomah County Department of Community Justice Research and Planning Unit. Multnomah County received a fiscal year 15 grant, and Rachel will be sharing some insights into the grant experience. On behalf of the staff and board of the CSG Justice Center, I want to congratulate you again for being chosen as the Second Chance Act grantee. The Second Chance Act grant programs are highly competitive and sought after, and policymakers at the federal, state, and local level are looking to Second Chance Act grantees to advance the understanding of effective reentry and recidivism reduction practices. We are wholeheartedly committed to providing support that will help you make the best of your grants, and we look forward to working with each of you as you implement your projects. Just to give you a national perspective, you are joining a group that spans across the nation with 37 current awarded grantees under the Smart Supervision Grant Program. Now, I will turn it over to Heather to give more information on the Bureau of Justice Assistance, or BJA, and the Second Chance Act.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Second Chance Act has supported over $300 million in reentry investments to a variety of initiatives across the country. The Bureau of Justice Assistance administers these grants, including the Smart Supervision Program. The Second Chance Act, which was signed into law in 2008, is the first federal legislation to authorize federal support for reentry programs. Recognizing how complex reentry initiatives are and the importance of integrating research and evidence into those initiatives, the Second Chance Act authorized the creation of the National Reentry Resource Center for Adult and Juvenile Reentry. In 2009, following a competitive process, the CSG Justice Center was selected to launch the National Reentry Resource Center and to provide training and technical assistance to all Second Chance Act grantees. The Justice Center is a national nonprofit organization that serves policymakers at the local, state, and federal levels from all branches of government. Staff provide practical, nonpartisan advice and evidence-based, consensus-driven strategies to increase public safety and strengthen communities. The National Reentry Resource Center is funded by BJA and, as I've said, is intended to provide support to you and other SCA grantees as well as the broader field. And on behalf of BJA, please accept my great congratulations on your awarding of this grant. We're very excited to work together going forward and to document the successes that you achieve. Thanks, Chidi.
Thanks, Heather. The NRRC has three primary functions. The first is to provide technical assistance. The NRRC staff have worked with nearly 600 SCA grantees, including 40 state corrections agencies. The NRRC provides individualized, intensive, and targeted technical assistance, training, and distance learning to support SCA grantees. Second, the NRRC website is a premier clearinghouse for resources on reentry. The NRRC houses the What Works in Reentry Clearinghouse to provide a one-stop shop for research on the effectiveness of a wide variety of reentry programs and practices. The NRRC houses an online library of publications and distance learning trainings. Third, the NRRC moves the field forward by developing new knowledge through projects. The NRRC engages private sector leaders on improving employment opportunities for people with criminal records. The NRRC has launched a national initiative to help counties and jails address mental illness in jails. It is also working with policymakers to help juvenile justice agencies achieve better outcomes for youth in custody. These are some of the current reentry projects of the NRRC. This is just to give you an idea of the information on the NRRC website, including online resources, key reentry issue areas, and current criminal justice news updates. Now we will move on to an overview of the SCA Smart Supervision Grant Program, or SSP. The purpose of the Smart Supervision Program is to support the development and implementation of evidence-based probation and parole programs that effectively address the needs of offenders, improve supervision success rates, and reduce recidivism. The goal of these grants is to increase successful supervision outcomes in order to reduce recidivism. Through the Smart Supervision grant funding, BJA and the field are looking to projects such as yours to learn about innovative trends in supervision. In the next few slides, I want to highlight some trends that we have seen in the field while working with SSP grantees over the years. The first trend deals with conditions of supervision. Programs and projects are being tailored based on the R&R, risk, need, and responsivity factors. Risk. Agencies are beginning to focus supervision and services on those who are most likely to reoffend, as characterized by a validated risk assessment tool. The needs factor. Conditions of supervision help to address the person's greatest criminogenic needs. And the responsivity factor. Agencies adapt interactions and services to enhance clients' ability to learn and acquire new attitudes and skills. There has also been a growing shift to tailor condition of supervision to reflect the 3R principles identified by APPA. The first being that conditions are realistic. There are a limited number of conditions so that individuals can satisfy the conditions and officers can monitor them as well. The second R being that conditions are relevant and informed by validated risk and needs assessments. The third R is that conditions are research-based. They focus on interventions and rules proven to reduce crime and promote successful outcomes. The second trend in the field centers around case management. There is a shift to use empirical assessments to identify dynamic factors and criminogenic needs. Motivational interviewing is used to identify goals, strengths, and stability factors. There's also a shift to use a team-based approach, including correctional counselors, treatment providers, employment counselors, and mentors, with the client also being a member of the team. Assessment and interview results are used to rank target areas for intervention. Action steps are specifically defined to achieve clients' goals. Sanctions and incentives are defined, and schemes are shared with clients. Schemes are implemented by officers with swiftness and certainty to respond to qualifying conditions. Clients are reassessed at defined intervals or in response to defined trigger events, such as successful completion of programs, compliance violations, or loss of a job. And finally, case management plans are updated based on risk factors, levels, goals, and strategies. The third trend deals with supervision responses. APPA and the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges identified 5 principles of effective incentives and sanctions. The first principle being that incentives and sanctions are fair. The impacts of responses depend on the client's circumstances. The second principle of incentives and sanctions is that they are certain, making sure that clients know in advance how you will respond to successes or infractions, and then following through. The third principle is that incentives and sanctions are swift. Respond quickly so that incentives or sanctions are associated with the behavior that you're trying to encourage or discourage. Incentives and sanctions are proportionate. Responses should be proportional to the magnitude of the achievement or transgression. And the fifth principle is that incentives and sanctions are individualized. Tailor responses to clients' risks, needs, learning styles, abilities, and motivations to change, tying back to the responsivity principle mentioned earlier. The fourth trend we have seen deals with how agencies ensure that clients are receiving quality programming through evidence-based practices when working with community-based organizations as partners. Agencies are making sure their partners have researched the target population to determine the needs of participants. Agencies should learn whether there are a sufficient number of programs and program slots to address the needs of clients. Agencies can ensure the quality of partner programs by reviewing the content of programs to assess fidelity to evidence-based practices and consider aspects of the program that affect participants' outcomes, including staff skills and community linkages. Agencies can address deficiencies by providing training to service providers about general and specific topics, such as reentry and risk. And finally, agencies can ensure quality programming by developing strategies to hold service providers accountable, such as performance-based contracting systems. The fifth trend we've seen through working with this grant cohort is evident in the emphasis on researcher-practitioner partnership and the evolving role of the research partner. The role of the researcher has gone from being post hoc, one who simply responds to data questions, receives the data file, and is solely used for their research method expertise, to now being part of the intervention development support, seen as a co-designer of the research and data questions, observes, monitors, and provides feedback regarding the project, and has subject matter expertise. Although the researcher-practitioner partnership is evolving, some lingering obstacles still remain, such as agencies with a history of data use and abuse, difficulty in really translating data to measurable outcomes, building capacity of agencies, and the history of agencies keeping records rather than collecting usable data. We should have Rachel on the line, but if not, we can move on. I think she's having some technical issues. So at this time, we'll move to Heather to discuss more about the grantee support.
Thanks, Chidi. So there are multiple resources available to grantees for different types of support. BJA administers the Smart Supervision Grant Program, and while you're accountable to us for financial and progress reports, there are different points of contact for some other items. So state policy advisors at BJA are your contact for reporting and budget-related questions. And you should see on your screen now a list of 3 individuals who you can report to, or excuse me, who you are assigned to report to based on your state's geographic location. Then, CSR Incorporated administers a performance measurement tool that you're responsible to complete at regular intervals as outlined in the grant solicitation. If you have any questions about completing the tool, please contact CSR or your state policy advisor. TA providers from the National Reentry Resource Center, as you have heard and will continue to hear, will provide a wide variety of support related to content and facilitation of your Smart Supervision program. If you have any questions about how these 3 different sources of support intersect, please don't hesitate to ask any of us. This next slide talks about BJA's expectations for grantees. First and foremost, we expect that all grantees will complete proposed activities. For example, if you propose to stand up a program and serve adults under supervision, you should serve the number of adults that you propose to serve during the grant period. On the other hand, if your proposal was to train staff, you should be sure that you complete training and train the number of staff that you proposed in your original submission to BJA. If you need to change any of these things, there are mechanisms for that, and that's where your state policy advisor comes in. Additionally, BJA expects that all grantees use validated risk and needs assessment instruments, as well as the most appropriate evidence-based practices and interventions to serve your target population. We also expect that folks will seek help when it is needed and communicate regularly with your TA providers, BJA staff, including myself, and your state policy advisor. Lastly, we expect that you will develop a practitioner-researcher partnership to support the activities and complete a process and/or outcome evaluation. And this next slide is about what you can expect from us. You can expect ongoing and timely support from BJA as well as other avenues that we fund, including the National Reentry Resource Center's technical assistance. Chidi, back to you.
Thanks, Heather. The NRRC provides TA in a variety of ways. Every grantee will have a standing monthly call with their TA provider. TA providers are also available via phone and email for questions outside of the monthly calls. Site visits are also available where a grantee presents a particular challenge or there is a need for a training or peer sharing opportunity. TA will also include webinars on various topics and resource sharing via email or our website. We've developed a tool for the Smart Supervision program called the Planning and Implementation Guide, or the P&I Guide. The P&I Guide is also a tool to help grantees identify implementation goals and measurement objectives, establish a leadership structure and engage key leadership, develop a comprehensive program that is oriented around evidence-based practices, communicate progress with key stakeholders, evaluate the program and think about sustainability, and it'll help develop a TA plan with NRRC technical assistance provider. And it will also help grantees comply with BJA's expectations for the SSP grants. The P&I Guide is also a user-friendly tool. It will actually serve as a roadmap to your SMART project that will help ensure that your agency and partners stay on the same page. The P&I Guide is organized into two parts. The first part reviews the rationale for the project, identifying specific goals and measurement objectives, and it inventories any partner organizations and defines their roles in the project. This will be in short answer format and shouldn't take too much effort to complete. The second part of the P&I Guide is a logic model. It serves as a systematic guide. Given the problem and goals identified, it helps to answer the question, why do you think what you're doing will have the intended effects? The logic model also helps to track inputs, which are the resources needed, helps to track the activities, the outputs, and the outcomes for the project. The logic model asks you to identify the link from objectives to activities to participants, then linking process measures set out in the project to outcomes, and ultimately outcome measures. This is where the emphasis on the researcher-practitioner relationship also comes into play to help create a structure for this process. The P&I Guide is a big part of the technical assistance process, and grantees are encouraged to work as a team to complete the sections. Guides should be shared in advance with the NRRC TA provider and will help to guide the monthly calls. Grantees are encouraged to update exercises as program changes occur and inform the TA provider of these changes. As previously stated, your TA provider is available for assistance in completing the guide, either during the monthly calls or via email or phone. And as a follow-up to this webinar, I will email a copy of the 2016 Smart Supervision P&I Guide for your project team to review. At this time, I think we have Rachel from Multnomah County available on the line to share her experience as a grantee with the grant process.
That's correct. Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, I am a research analyst for Multnomah County Department of Community Justice, and we were a recipient of the Smart Supervision Grant. And, you know, specifically, I guess, you know, what I would say regarding the P&I Guide and the logic model is that, you know, both were really important tools that helped us get organized initially. And, you know, we were sort of luckily brought in early as the researcher. You know, we work with the people in the field as the researchers. And, you know, it was really important to be able to, it kind of forced us to get on the same page and talk through items that we probably wouldn't have really thought about as early on if we didn't have it. So, you know, I think that what I had learned is that the more work you put into having a very clear P&I guide and logic model, the more, sort of the easier everything will be later on, and the quicker any issues or misunderstandings would be identified and cleared up. Do you want me to go into some other parts of it, or what? Is there anything else that I can, just want to make sure this is useful?
Sure. Rachel, if you can just give us some lessons learned during, so far during your grant experience that new grantees should be aware of.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I would say one of the things is that what we realized that what we had written in the initial grant application and what was in the initial award and the terms, we had said that we would be able to provide specific data, and you know, the people who had written the grant hadn't, or either they had consulted with the research team or they just hadn't done it in the way that that it was sort of communicated correctly. So as a result, there were certain numbers and certain types of things that we thought, or the grant team thought that the researchers would be able to provide. And when it came down to it, it wasn't data we were collecting the data, but it wasn't in a form where we could accurately analyze it and provide the accurate numbers to BJA. So very quickly on, we talked about this together. I mean, when we were starting to put together, you know, this information and going through the P&I guide and the logic model, and we said, wait a second, you know, there's a couple questions here that our data can't answer those questions. And so what we ended up doing is, you know, we have a couple state systems and county systems that track, you know, data. And what we ended up doing actually is creating essentially a Google form for the parole and probation officers to provide data that way, very specific to the grant, the program the grant was funding, so that we could very accurately report to BJA exactly what was going on per the terms of the grant and per the terms of the application that we had submitted. So, you know, what I would say is the sooner that you can, lesson learned is the sooner you can get together and really map out, and again, the logic model was critical here, map out what it is, what information you need to be providing to BJA, the earlier you can figure out whether or not it's something that you collect. And even if you collect it, it doesn't necessarily mean it might be in the right format. So, you know, one example would be, you know, I think that we collect quite a bit of information on housing and drug use and treatment, but it just wasn't quite in the terms that we needed to provide to BJA. And so we were able to go back to the people who put that information in, who were already collecting that information and reporting it to our research unit, and say, hey, for this grant, for these specific clients, we're going to need it reported a slightly different way. Can you do that? And you know, as a researcher, sometimes the field staff, it's hard for them to understand just because they don't sort of live in the research world. And so we ended up, at their request, we ended up putting together some cheat sheets for them, saying, you know, hey, if you have one of the following clients, make sure to, you know, follow this link and, you know, just provide the following information. We tested out the form, we tested out the data collection method, and then, you know, we provided a training for them. And you know, so far so good. You know, they really caught on quickly. You know, they had some good questions and we were able to answer them. And so, you know, I think the lesson really is just making sure to work together and to really try to attack the things that you need to do for the grant really quick, making sure that you understand what you're going to have to be reporting quarterly and annually and things like that.
Thanks so much, Rachel. That was very helpful. It's really important to hear from a grantee about this experience on the ground and to help the newer grantees to understand how to attack this grant moving forward and the supports that are available for them. So thank you again for sharing that insight with us, Rachel.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
At this time, with that, we'll go ahead and answer some questions that have come up in the Q&A panel. Again, please continue to enter questions into the Q&A box at the bottom right portion of your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can. We'll be sure to follow up with you on questions that we don't get to or are unable to answer at this time. The first question we have says, are grantees permitted to submit a completed P&I guide prior to March 31st, 2017 in hopes of gaining BJA approval of the proposed action plan sooner? This question, Heather, if you're still available on the line.
Sure.
Okay.
So that is a great question, and there are a few factors that go into this. So the first thing I would say is that you'll need to work with, the answer is we hope so and we would try, but the details, just because I want to offer as much information as possible, the details and moving parts here are that as you'll learn in the future from CHEATI and from your individual TTA providers at the NRRC, the P&I guide is a bit of a collaborative process because as you complete sections, your TA provider will review them with you and give some feedback in case there's anything to update, and then you'll send it over to us at BJA, or the TA provider will. That's between you and them. So that's the first moving part, is to work on that timeline with your TA provider. I would recommend that if you think you'll complete something early, to give them a heads up so they can be sure to make space in their calendars to be available to give you feedback on the new timeline. The second part would be that you and the TA provider could work together to similarly notify BJA. And you could notify me or you could notify your state policy advisor. We work really closely, we share information. I don't want you to be overly concerned about which one of us you contact. We can work that out. The moral of the story, I suppose, is just give folks a heads up if you think something's gonna happen early so that we can try to get all the pieces in place. If everyone has a heads up and everything looks good, then there is absolutely no reason that the funds would not be released early. I just want to be clear about managing expectations for those timelines because it is a bit of a process on our end to release the funds. So we have a schedule that we work to. But this also, frankly, goes for anything else. It's a pretty collaborative process, so we can work together to make things work best for you and for your program.
Thank you, Heather. The second question that came in says, will we make available the webinar contact info for Rachel? And Rachel, if you're still on the line, and if that's okay with you, we'll certainly share that, your contact information with the grantees.
Oh, absolutely. Happy to help in any way I can.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Are there any more questions? If not, again, you have the contact information for Heather at BJA and myself here at CSG Justice Center. And if there are any more questions that come in, please feel free to reach out. This concludes the webinar. Thank you, Heather and Rachel, again for presenting with me today. We will email a link to the recording of this presentation when it becomes available in the coming weeks. The link will also be made available on the National Reentry Resource Center's website at csgjusticeCenter.org/NRRC. I also encourage you to sign up for our newsletter at www.csgjusticecenter.org/subscribe, as well to receive up-to-date news and information. Thank you to everyone on the line, and have a great afternoon.